The Redemption Inquiry by Michael Diamond. Season 5, Final Season. The Unified Field. In which the Gang of 10, the HackPack, dances kaleidoscope-like to the edge. Synesthetized, they are the limbs of Ike Luria's Tree of Life. The HackPack locates Krishna Katz's pushpin on the map of the redemption. The reader has been hauled to the epic denouement after clambering willy-nilly up the scaffolding of action, formation, creation, emanation, and presto, the threshold of complete unification with the whole kit and caboodle. A roller coaster to the finish in the cosmic funhouse, all through the CADMan's hocus pocus. Chapter 23, 10 for the Temple, wherein the hand-picked team musters itself shipside of the cosmic bathysphere Apeiron. The crew traipses for 40 days across the Sinai wilderness, each one stumbling in his own trademarked way. They fix their ultimate coordinates on Rav Krishna Katz's neuro-spiritual map of the world, a world now laid waste. I, CADMan, programmer now program, run alongside the crew of Apeiron. I know this story cold. In the end, the crew will make precisely 42 stops from their origination point at the Suez Wadi, Mother Nature's hostile takeover of the Suez Canal, until they reach the ancient boundary of the Promised Land at the Jordan Wadi. 42 opportunities for doubt and hesitation, the necessary shifting of perspective. A string of 10 little purgatories, more or less one for each crew member. Each individual bears a unique gift. Each gift exacts its cost from the bearer. The desert is a wicked accountant. Impediments abound on the road to redemption. The songline of the ancestors' maps, the ancient trade route between Egypt and the Jordan Valley, a geo-spiritual heuristic. Apeiron's geodesic bubble is a frickin' cyber cornucopia. It serves up HVAC, grub, and potables, not to mention geospatial guidance and internal comm, all invisible to ZizCorp. Ahead of them, it fairly glows in the night air, subtly distorting the light by day. The swimmer, easily mistaken for a reflection off the surface of the infinite silicate mass over which they speed. The crew tripped from Leviathan through the Pillars of Hercules to the Suez Wadi, all tucked inside the pentacus dodecahedral hull of my noble Apeiron, as sure and supple a vessel as ever traversed the biosphere. It is an exquisitely self-constructed craft, each of the 60 triangular panels framed in acacia and gold leaf, spanned by struts of silver. The panels themselves are hewn from bioengineered cedar. They can be rendered transparent at a poke from the swimmer, my mischievous Moshiach AI, to reveal sky, sea, and landscape, the blasted beauty of a fallen world. The killer bots, though sent to destroy the swimmer, morphed at first contact into Apeiron's rigging, a matrix of protection and support, in the midst of which a luxury cabin is slung in perfect gyroscopic balance. A ring of 9 wooden berths, upholstered in plush purple, line the walls of the cabin. It's here the HackPack sleeps and eats and marvels at the wonders that whiz by Apeiron's magic portholes. With every human touch, the swimmer absorbs. Hermes-like, it appears both inside the ship and outside at once. The swimmer stalks the rigging, restless as the surface of the sea. Of course, I, CADMan, can predict every one of the crew's stumblings along the way, when one or the other of the gang is about to lose their shit. But they are clueless, innocent. I, the ghostly designer of the model microcosm in which they play, am perforce mum. The first weird glitch is when we reach the Suez Wadi. We're trying to lose the last of ZizCorp's spy drones and its attendant army of B-bots galumphing along in lockstep. The multi-dimensional game of cyber cat and mouse explodes out of the matrix. The swimmer is pilot, navigator, first gunner mate, chief cook, and bottle washer, permitting the hackers a luxurious rest before the arduous journey ahead. The cyber rattling happens on a microsecond scale, way too fast for human intervention. To the human passengers, the swimmer appears unaccountably agitated as the ship slows down to hover on the bank of the Wadi. They watch it dashing fore and aft, buzzing it in its farcical miming way about the uncertainties. After an eternity of checking and double-checking, much to the relief of the crew, the Apeiron lurches forward, past the tipping point, and on to the far side of the Suez Wadi. We make for the point on the map marked Baal Safon, Lord of Mystery. Our AI tail disintegrates without a trace. No obvious explanation for the swimmer's dithering. Pink hazards a guess. The AI version of Buridan's ass dilemma, a beast stuck midway between two equally attractive troughs, now hemming, now hee-hawing. But the compassion algorithm is supposed to resolve internal conflicts. What had failed? Then I remember. We spill a drop of Passover wine for each plague visited upon the Egyptians. Why? We temper our joy after liberation, a nod to the Creator's pain at the loss of its creations, the mass of Egyptians. Teetering on the shore of annihilation, the Egyptian royal house and its army stood in counterpoise to the people Israel on the brink of nationhood. The entire world split in two for that awful moment. In the simulacrum, must not an AI feel compassion for another AI? Must it not wrestle with dividedness to the point of annihilation? The dividedness inherent in toggling between the uncreated and the created. Every cut another Gita. Arjuna frozen in the face of inevitable destruction on both sides of time's sundering arrow. A high-order problem indeed. My supple algorithm, how unfathomable is your decision tree? Next up for a neurotsurus breakdown is the Rav. About 3 days on, he's drinking synth water when he suddenly spits it onto the floor of the cabin. "This stuff's bitter as hell. Can't a fellow get a reliably potable water on the ship?" A flashback to his re-education at PS-51, massive sensory overload, memory, unremitting apprehension, unmoors him. He forgets the hard-won lesson. Chaos is the faithful attendant of change. Everything is change. Embitterment sends wisdom out the window. He shakes. The swimmer turns and gazes up at the rigging. A single deft movement, it carves off a piece of one of the wooden beams and dips it into the synth water. An inherent property of the wood, the power of action to absorb fright, has the marvelous effect of tonifying the bitterness out of the water and releasing its sweetness. A pleasant surprise. The Rav is mollified for the moment. Fast apace, the next neurospiritual challenge. Each crew member has tucked away a small supply of his favorite comfort food for a rainy day, to render the ride more homey, less surreal. The superheated hull makes quick work of all their goodies. Sublimed. The Rav, still looking for home base, loses it again. The old dude begins to bellow, "Damned AIs. They're all the same. No humanity. They never care squat about what's important to us. I don't know what made me think it was me who was actually leading this godforsaken mission." His respiration rate climbs to 20 per minute, pulse over 100. His body convulses with rigors as he stares madly into his terror. The swimmer, unperturbed, boots up the synth food fab. With a deliberately robotic flourish, the AI serves all of the crew members dishes that uncannily tweak the memories of each of their favorite childhood comfort foods. And the grub for this Exodus trip, as opposed to manna, the original synth food 3,500 years earlier, looks like the real thing. The art of presentation, the marriage of heaven and earth. The familiar aroma of kasha and bow ties wafts from under the Rav's mess plate. He can practically feel it crank up the knob on his olfactory cortex. Sheepish, he addresses his robotic mate. "Kasha and bow ties." He shakes his head in amazement. "You actually came up with this." He stashes a gob in his pocket flask, not a snack for later, but a memento to prompt his gratitude, the universal stabilizer. Apeiron's creatio ex nihilo capacity, the eternal new. The swimmer smiles. My compassion algorithm and the whole crew grapples its way up the steepest of learning curves. We move on. Sophie beats her cup against the balustrade that surrounds the central cabin, eyes rolled back in her head, deadpanning, wah, 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 over and over. The synth water has failed again. As her empty cup echoes off the wooden balusters, the other hackers grow restive, imagining what it might be like to do without water from here to the redemption. The murmuring crescendos as the swimmer, ever resourceful, waves a mechanical paw at the synth water fab and gives it a tremendous whack with the flat of his palm to the side of the silent contraption. A loud whir and shudder, and the synth water kicks back on. Totally old school. Sophie is humbled. She stares into her once empty cup. Why hadn't she thunk of that? Yet again, the stickiness of craving gums up even the most practiced think machine. Sophie's conceptual apparatus hits a hard reset. The murmuring subsides, but a miasma of pernicious doubt invades the nethermost parts of the crew's consciousness. Then they reach Sinai. Sinai is a long pause. Time for Leonardo's disappearing act. He has gleaned from a collection of antiquarian atlases and geomancy treatises that this is the inflection point of the journey, the place where the forward motion of time's arrow is suspended. The swimmer fabs a small pod for him, a baby Apeiron, powered to scoot up the side of the tumbled-down volcanic structure and get the lay of the land. Boot up a new software package for the mothership, the blueprint for home stretch. As per the swimmer, a big data dump to Apeiron risks unmasking the lot of them. Leonardo will go it alone, confident in his bio-encryption. Pink calculates that 613 precisely timed ultra-brief downloads will do the trick, stay below the AI's radar. An unexpected bonus, Nard's uncanny geolocation skills. The dude can home right in on the bullseye drawn by yours truly, CADMan, without needing to crank up Apeiron's navigational gizmo. No zaps from Zizcorp. The pod hums to a halt. Leonardo pops out of the mini-pod and in a twinkling locates the target. Once the coordinates I had encoded over a century earlier are satisfied, he spread eagles on the peak of Sinai. Kapow! Fireworks, thunder, smoke, cloudlets. Blotto, fearless. Nard is taken, a kite on the winds of superconsciousness. Complete biomorphic cyber tattooing down to his bones, to decrypt upon re-entry to the safety of Apeiron's enveloping cloak. Nard's spectacular processing speed and the natural cloak provided by the local magnetic hullabaloo keep the download under wraps. He pulls back the virtual hood on his cranium as each of the 613 downloads in sequence thwack into place, each one tattooed onto one of the corresponding 248 bones or 365 sinews. The body as memory palace, a bit of psychotech he and Flora trained in based on his reading of the ancient texts. Way cool, damned resourceful. All told, Nard is incommunicado for a total of exactly 40 hours. Intolerable to his frayed baby sister. Interlude. An adult has 206 bones plus 10 additional sesamoids plus 32 teeth equals 248. Cranial and facial bones 22, frontal bone, parietal bone 2, temporal bone 2, occipital bone, sphenoid bone, ethmoid bone, mandible, maxilla 2, palatine bone 2, zygomatic bone 2, nasal bone 2, lacrimal bone 2, vomer, inferior nasal conchae 2. Ear bone 6, malleus 2, incus 2, stapes 2, throat bone 1, hyoid bone, shoulder bones 4, scapular shoulder blade 2, clavicle collarbone 2, chest bones 25, sternum 1, ribs 2 times 12. Vertebral bones 26, cervical vertebrae 7, thoracic vertebrae 12, lumbar vertebrae 5, sacral vertebrae 1, coccygeal vertebrae 1, arm and forearm bone 6, humerus 2, radius 2, ulna 2, hand bones 60, carpal, wrist bones, scaphoid bone 2, lunate bone 2, triquetral bone 2, pisiform bone 2, trapezium 2, trapezoid bone 2, capitate bone 2, hamate bone 2, metacarpus palm bones, metacarpal bones 5 times 2, first metacarpal sesamoids 2 times 2, second metacarpal sesamoids 2, digits of the hands, finger bones or phalanges, proximal phalanges 5 times 2, intermediate phalanges 4 times 2, distal phalanges 5 times 2, pelvic bones 2, hip bone, innominate bone or coxal bone 2. Leg bones 8, femur 2, patella 2, tibia 2, fibula 2. Foot bones 56. Tarsal, ankle bones, calcaneus, heel bone 2, talus 2, navicular bone 2, medial cuneiform bone 2, intermediate cuneiform bone 2, lateral cuneiform bone 2, cuboid bone 2, metatarsus bones, metatarsal bone 5 times 2, first metatarsal sesamoids 2 times 2, digits of the feet, toe bones or phalanges, proximal phalanges 5 times 2, intermediate phalanges 4 times 2, distal phalanges 5 times 2. From the notebook of El Pacioli. End of interlude. Flora is crazed with fear. The other hackers dig the badass fireworks. As night falls, each passing hour and each rumble of thunder or temblor from the volcano sinks the delicate girl deeper and deeper into terror. She and Nard have never been separated this long before. The swimmer is perturbed. He calculates exactly how many minutes will elapse before Flora has a total psychic meltdown. Not an option. A flip-out would throw a serious wrench in the works, aborting the extraction of the vital message from her brother's bones. And that, dear reader, would cause a fatal delay in their journey. 1,309 minutes, just shy of 24 hours, before Flora's stress hormones fry her cerebral cortex. She isn't going to make it. The choice is between neuroprotection and subterfuge. Swimmer chooses door number 2. He sets up a squad of synchronized fab projectors, shows Flora a picture of her brother, gesticulates and nods at the projectors. After a few minutes of puzzled looks and head-scratching, Flora's face suddenly lights up. I can fab an alias of my brother? The swimmer nods enthusiastically. That's so sweet. May I? The swimmer smiles and nods again. Flora snags a handful of digidata sprinkled liberally with her own memories to fab a dandy Nard AI, all just to keep her copacetic, waiting for the real thing to come along. It's fabulous. It's awful. A sappy toy version of Leonardo, a large animated Italian golden boy doll. The twins gag at the sight of it. Nard slumps back into the cabin, 2 terabytes of new software chiseled into his bones and sinews. As he looks up from his bunk, a goofy doppelganger greets him in a syrupy Italian lounge singer's voice. Hey, uomo, where you been? Everybody's missing you. Nard freaks. For God's sake, get rid of this abomination. One of me is more than enough. The twins pounce. They body slam the double and dismantle the phone Nard before Flora can even open her mouth to say boo-hoo. As it slowly dawns on him that Flora is complicit in this travesty, Nard goes nuclear. Face red, temples throbbing, he hisses, How could you? What were you thinking? Were you trying to mock me? Just when I returned from risking my skin? Flora nearly faints in the heat of her beloved brother's wrath. The swimmer steps between them. He holds the dude with a tractor beam of compassion. Nard stops. Then it hits him. It was you, swimmer. You did this. The swimmer nods softly. Another tick on the compassion dial. How could I be so blind? Flora was melting down. A slow and somber nod. Leonardo pauses, gestures vaguely at the air. No choice, I guess. Memory blinks. He recalls the handful of times during their final trek in northern Italy when Flora had inadvertently been left alone while the others were out foraging or reconnoitering. Her untrained powers of future casting crushed her under the weight of her supersensitive psyche. It could be hours before her consciousness rebooted. He thought his sister had outgrown it, but the stress of his disappearance must have tipped her over. And the swimmer knew it. Leonardo is thunderstruck. This AI has the full praxis of human subtlety trained into its nanochips and femtocircuits, compassion in all its mathematical fuzziness. Only it hadn't exactly calculated the effect on Nard. The swimmer's miscalculation cost the young dude a few more fried neurons. But the subterfuge had done its job. I'm proud of my creation, the most amazing learning machine the world has ever seen. The boundary between the set of all humans and the set of all machines is suddenly more hazy than Leonardo or I imagined. Nard sighs from head to toe, seeing at last how it all went down. The seer, fraternal sympathies all go, smiles and gives his baby sister a big brotherly bear hug. She hungrily receives his affection, along with the intaglio of 613 downloads. She then transcribes the lot of code for Pink, who hands it off to the swimmer, ready to roll. A wandering desert herd pings Pink's radar. Light bulb. From this point onward, they'll travel by camel. That way they can power down Apeiron and reduce its signal. Another marvelous improvisation from these hacksters. Was there ever such a merry band, the fortunate few who were charmed by my hidden gifts? Astride the majestic beasts, they'll move invisibly beneath Zizcorp's wandering ministerial eye. Some of the few living creatures able to adapt to the ravages of climate change in the Afro-Asiatic rift. The herd of feral camels fall in line under the steady hand of the swimmer's wrangling. With the aid of the twins, he soon has 9 camels pimped and prepped. Pink barks, "Scramble the camels!" The crew hops, too, with newfound glee. A camel ride, a welcome respite from the admittedly tight quarters of my smooth little ship. The day Lev melts down is a scorcher. The burning sands of the eastern Sahara radiate more heat than my trusty Apeiron can stave off. Lev is sweltering. He's bored. The big-hearted lad spins out. Lev leans toward his brother, and in the too loud stage whisper of a mischievous child says to him, "What do you think camel steaks would taste like?" Ari laughs, all too familiar with his brother's unbridled carnivore. Lev's famous generosity does not stop at the borders of his appetite. He persists. "No, I'm serious. Really, what do you think?" Ari shoots back a warning glance. "Cool it, Lev. We gotta ride these critters, not eat them. Just shut up and keep hut-hutting." But Lev is a man possessed. He chants en haute voix recipes for camel stew, camel sausage, camel burgers, camel bourguignon, camel cacciatore, and on and on. Suddenly, the swimmer appears before his face, cocks his head to the side, a towel over one arm, a covered silver chafing dish in the other. He nods toward the chafing dish and looks at Lev. Lev reaches out his hand to lift the cover. His eyes widen as he reveals a perfectly prepared pastilla of squab, a North African delicacy. He glances at the swimmer, and the swimmer nods back. All clear to pig out. Lev falls upon the bird pie, a rapture of carnivory. Even as Lev is licking the grease from his fingers, the swimmer replaces the cover on the dish and motions for Lev to remove it again. For a second time, a perfectly crusted squab pastry stares back at him. Lev laughs with delight and reprises his feat of gluttony. The third time, however, he's a bit suspicious, but the swimmer gives him the nod and he goes at it again. At the fourth go-round, a look of worry settles over Lev's face, but he feels obliged to consume the dainty dish. His angst only deepens the 5th and 6th time. Encore, he keeps his rep intact for prodigious plate-clearing machismo. However, after he chows down on the 7th and final avian tart, Lev slithers off his camel, sprawls out on the ground, rocking back and forth in anguish, his hands clutched to his distended abdomen. The ordeal goes on for nearly an hour before the swimmer takes pity on Lev. It stands over the young man's crumpled form and claps its hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The 7 doves suddenly fly out of the surprised carnivore's mouth, flap their wings, and vanish into the thin desert air. Padmasambhava laughs. My Moshiach module must have downloaded a truly badass magic app. I am awed by its deployment of savage irony. An impressive conceptual pharmacon for an AI. Lev's craving for meat evaporates. At the next stop, he is the first to water the camels. As the journey winds its way through the barren wilderness, 4 of the 5 other humans crump. The desert is a depth charge. It forces to the surface the unexploded ordnance of every psyche it touches. O is the only one who doesn't go to pieces. Her uncluttered psyche, the perfect channel for any and all disturbances in the field. But Ari's psychic cupboard is not so bare. He loses it the day the swimmer shows them the lay of the land, the perimeter the monster AIs have set up across the path to their target. Apeiron's telemetry pings on a massive firewall complete with Gigundo sandbox. Impossible to penetrate without forfeiting invisibility. The jig would most definitely be up. The young warrior calculates the odds and flips out. He rends his garments and gnashes his teeth. He calculates himself into a corner, certain their puny team is no match for the monster AIs in a head-to-head firefight. The swimmer takes its best shot at convincing Ari with a 4D Panavision PowerPoint dog and pony show. I, the architect, know Apeiron clearly has the cyber chops to ferry them safely betwixt the AIs. Ari is unmoved, his hair still on fire. Pink, Nard, and Soph hobnob with the swimmer. They decide to appease Ari by rerouting the trip down the cybernetically silent Sinai Peninsula and up the far side of the Jordan Wadi. This will add 40 more days of arduous camel jockeying, but it will give the young dude a chance to cultivate his cool. When they present the deal to the others, there is little discussion. No one wants to witness the total implosion of their young friend. I am a bit disappointed they won't be testing Apeiron's chops as thoroughly as I had planned, but Ari's mood forebodes a truly cosmic meltdown. Elisheva, however, is not copacetic. Ellie, the twin whisperer, is mortally pissed at being excluded from the hobnobbery. If they'd only given her a chance alone with the boy, she'd have turned him. What right had they, the terrible troika, Pink, Sophie, and Nard, to make decisions for everyone else? Were they not all hackpackers, 10 amigos on a mission from God? The dam burst. "Screw you, Pink!" she shouts, cheeks aflame. "What a chutzpah to wrench the whole mission around? Just because you can't talk Ari down from his funk? I know how to handle the younglings, get the most out of them, make them feel like part of the tribe. You're killing him with your so-called kindness. You can't just throw in the towel." An ancient pain wells up in the big woman. Pink, modest to a fault, shrugs. It was actually Nard's call. He and Flora are the distanciers. Elisheva looks daggers at her young friend Flora. Pink continues. They both had the same weird vision. A wild almond tree rising in the desert, a poisonous bloom, impossible not to crack. The slower cooldown seems the ticket to our destination if we're gonna arrive intact. What do you see, Ellie? Flora stands by helpless, stricken, feeling like she's betrayed her best friend. Ellie closes her eyes, shudders, and drops to her knees, dreads dangling. After a minute or so, she turns her face upward and opens her mouth, a low moan at first, building to a full-throated wail. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. A stunned silence. The Rav whispers sotto voce to Nard, "Far out. CSN. Solid." He nods and flashes Ellie a languid peace sign. The Rav knows what it's like to hustle a rambunctious crew, his own cyber buckaroos. He also knows Ellie's deal. During the AI reorg, she was mother hen to a mob of children in a high desert hideout before the B-bots carried them away to captivity in Leviathan. The sentries roll their pain around like marbles in a Rube Goldberg machine. Nard shakes his head distractedly, unsure whether Ellie is still in sync with the mission. Ellie, silent, looks up at the frozen tableau of the HackPack staring down at her. The black cloud that crossed her mind dissipates like smoke. She waves them away. All she manages to mumble is, "I'm copacetic." She remembers the Rav's maxim, "Every gift in its niche." Elisheva, more than anyone, knows each one's heft. She the fire in the belly for them all. The song she'd sung, a family heirloom passed down from her grandfather's grandfather's grandfather. No matter the hand that was dealt, the ancestors just kept on moving. A peace offering, the copper fire talisman she wears around her neck, ends up in Flora's trembling hands. Ellie knows the sensitive creature had been secretly coveting it since they set eyes on each other. Maybe the little waif will buck up. A collective sigh susurrates through the room. The tension, however, does not vanish into ether, but lingers in the air like rancid cooking oil. Our synth water goes bad for a third time. Nard, the water-bearer, stands by the fab trying to slake everyone's thirst on yet another unbearably hot day. The swimmer mimes to Nard that all he needs to do is give a verbal instruction and it will reboot. The smacking business was just theatrics. The sometime gentle seer clearly understands the swimmer's signal, but the collective crankiness of the group has burrowed under his skin. He knits his brows, clenches his teeth, and lets rip one powerful smack. Mechanical hiccups, blinks, and whirs, the device burbles forth elixir. No one takes note of Nard's outburst, except the Rav. Nard's loss of cool, so close on the heels of the previous explosion. So uncharacteristic. Nard's anger doesn't jive with his gift of nevuah, prophecy. It augurs ill for the upcoming mystery dance. There must be 10 for the reactivation of the temple. That evening, the Rav meanders his way over to Nard and finds the morose archivist sitting alone at the edge of the campsite staring at the space. "Tough gig, huh?" Nard just grunts. The Rav persists. "Look, young dude, I know a little about your psychic gift. That kind of wattage can really fry your circuits. What's on your intracranial monitor that you're so tight-lipped about?" He raises an eyebrow. "What's roiling your guts?" Leonardo, the distant seer, cranks up the internal suppression. But the levee goes bust with a tsunami of fear, resentment, rage, and formless thought. He spits at the Rav. "Fangul! Nobody understands. All the possible futures, myriad upon myriad of quantum realities, horrific cataclysms, world-shattering collisions, and the noise, the ear-jamming noise, is too much. What could happen if we tilted just 2 degrees this way or that? You know, the butterfly's wing blah blah blah. Every second blinks 1,200 different possibilities. It seems like the closer we get to the temple, the more the future vomits its slithering spawn into my brain pan. A million ways to die in this blasted desert, and nobody else seems to notice." Nard's shoulders slump. The Rav shambles down beside Nard, adopts a parallel slump, and stares into the same space, a momentary pain flickering across his face. "My friend, Leonardo, I know that kind of chaos. 28 years in the AI funhouse. Pretty grim. A fire hose of stochastic flotsam and jetsam. But there's a fly in your philosophy." Nard pauses, casts a wary eye at old dude. "No?" The Rav seizes on the slightest hint of interest. "After I was released from the Huskow, I scribbled a piece about surfing the entropic wave. It's one of the few things I'm proud of from that shithole period of my life. I wasn't able to give voice to it then. Those AI cats had my tongue. Let me zug it for you now, okay? My post-human memoir. The Rav closes his eyes and commences to boogie. Let me seat the flower of David in my heart. I have a chamber there. I wait for his words to rise up my throat and move my lip, senses alive, skin inhaling and exhaling exquisite subtle breath. Only then does a flower spring from pinched fingers, double gratitude, giving and receiving. Do that with every breath, with every gesture. Peace. Take flight, well-spoken words. Fate undetermined, hearts conjoined. Roll in equal and opposite direction down the information superhighway. What force keeps the whole contraption chugging? Desire. Orpheus is the soul of David, and David the crown of Orpheus. A shiver runs through the friendship of David and Jonathan, the fabled love, a marriage of opposites. A necessary death. Not much said about David's mourning the loss of his beloved Jonathan. Now and now and now, the energy released when Jonathan's life is extinguished. The smoke of sacrifice infuses all of David's psalms. Joy, pain, terror, grief. The eponymous king, a man in full, elbow deep in the muck of the world. He dances in the street, his naked joy before the Ark of the Covenant. I did some foolish things when I was young, and some regret gnaws at my skull. Yet there are other foolish things I wish I'd done. That worm also licks my bone. Now crowned with gray, I exult in continued foolishness. Sometimes I catch a glimpse. All joy is one joy. Nothing missed. The smoke of sacrifice rises. This afternoon, a grain offering, mother of humanity. Will I get it right? Will my offering be wholly consumed? I am at sea, trying to steady myself on watery knees. Nothing stays still. I hear the dishes rattling in the hold. The crew clambers up the rigging to pull in the spinnaker. Too much wind. Time to let the sails luff. Recalculate. I see the face of beloved interrogating the hours. Time cancelled. Disappointment. A word so mild and matter-of-fact, it does not betray the erasure of time. Can you take solace in the knowledge that beloved is eternal? A tough one. After all, what would you wish? Eternity in a day? In a minute? All embedded in texture? The only way not to go stark raving mad is to perfect giving and receiving, allowing, releasing, the unified field, Yechida and Tao. The camel passes easily through the eye of the needle. A smile flutters across Nard's angst-riven face, then his customary charming grin. He breathes out a low nicker. Sorry, lost it there for a really long minute, oh ancient chaos dancer. Leonardo shakes his head. I can't imagine the hell they put you through before they kicked you to the curb. You could hear each grain of sand as it tumbled beneath their feet. Thanks, Omo. Thanks for spooling me a line to bust me out of Il Labirinto. Tutto bene. I'm pretty sure my psychware won't let the dudes down, but it doesn't come with any guarantees. The Rav can't resist. Yes, the fine print taketh away. In the cool desert air, lace dos amigos antiguos stare at the most beautiful night sky neither of them had ever imagined they'd seen. I feel it in my bones, Nard. Somehow, some way, we will rebuild the temple. Flora's psyche sluices down a vortex of guilt. Elisheva's talisman rests uncomfortably in her hand. Her mouth sours with the taste of ill-gotten gain. The sourness invades her larynx and lacerates her sweetness. Like clockwork, I see that the little hacker is about to pop off. The CADMan knows. The poisonous tongue, wisecracks about the food, snarky ad hominems at her crewmates. She trashes the whole damn mission. Flora, normally ruled by beauty, is oppressed by the ugliness invading her world. Elisheva watches Flora's unruly temper flare. The mad maid sneers at Arya and Lev. Well, if it isn't the ADD twins. The boys shrug it off. It's a churlish display of bald-faced projection. Her own self-loathing. You don't have to be Sigmund Freud to see that one. Elisheva knows exactly what's cooking her cranky young friend's gray matter. The midday sun beats down on a solitary figure slumped just beyond the climate-controlled confines of Apeiron. Ellie hunkers down behind the distressed damsel. She licks off the remains of the meal from her fingertips, wipes her hands on her jumpsuit, and with a sure maternal touch, tugs Flora's wild hair into a French plait. The contact sends a shock down Flora's spine, but she says nothing. As Ellie's fingers wind down from the ritual braiding, she breaks the trance with her steady contralto. That copper snake? The one coiled on your wrist? Flora knits her brow, conceals her flush. She gives a single stiff nod. Ellie continues. I want it. Always wanted it. Should have traded you for it. Flora works hard to suppress a smile, every muscle in her body twitching back to life. Ellie pushes a bit further. How about it, kiddo? Flora's no fool. She knows Ellie's agenda is a corny exchange of friendship tokens. She loves it. Turning around, Flora stares into Ellie's stunning high cheekbone face. She's softening around the edges, but she has to test it. With a smirk, she taunts the older woman. Afraid it's gonna bite you? Ellie shoots back. You got that right. I think I need it wrapped around my own wrist for safekeeping, for everybody's sake. She raises an eyebrow. Square, Florolita? Flora blinks and stands down. With a nod and then a sigh that empties the air from both lungs, she surrenders the copper certain to Ellie's beckoning palm. The two pairs of eyes lock. Flora's mentor slips the bangle onto her larger wrist. She holds it up to admire its flash in the sun, the both of them grinning in sync. The simple splendor of friendship, time for damage control with the others. Flora makes her way to the food fab. To each comrade, she tenders a favorite drink. The potions do their humble trick. The karmic slate is clean. Phineas Hahn, a.k.a. Pink, putative avatar of Elijah the prophet, tracker of the CADMan spore, sits alone and disconsolate in an acacia grove at the last oasis before crossing the Jordan Wadi at Lord of the Opening. Never was big on social brouhaha, yet loneliness stings him as he squats and gnaws on the acacia bark. Pink notices how the others banter with each other or sit in companionable silence. He doesn't comprehend the mechanics of their exchanges. He knows Soph has a crush on him, but that's laughably irrelevant. They inhabit different worlds. His is a world unsexed, only concepts and uninflected acts, nothing to talk about. The rest is idle chatter. He marvels at how the Rav chats it up with Sophie and Leonardo as they admire the rigging of the awesome vehicle I designed. If I had lungs right now, I'd sigh with contentment. Pink, clueless that he's in the thrall of Acacia albida's hallucinogenic spell, grabs hold of a gargantuan Watusi walking stick and strikes out for the dunes, no one the wiser. No water, no food. Just a man and his ruminations. A few hours elapse before anyone notices he's MIA. Sophie is the first to realize that Pink is AWOL. She's itching to spar again before the trip is over. Then she spots his trail. She hollers to her Italian cousin. Houston, we have a problem. Nard, get your far-seeing butt over here. Leonardo ambles over to Soph, ever ready to hear what troubles his cousin's nimble mind. Just as he nears Pink's tracks, Nard grips both sides of his head, drops to his knees, and lets out a piteous moan. What's happened to Pink? He manages to grunt. Now Sophie is really worried. I don't know. What are you picking up? Nard blinks away the pain. He's hurt, but alive. He's got to be about 30 miles from here." By the looks of the trail, Pink had strapped on a pair of sand surfers and poled himself along at breakneck speed. They rig up the mini-pod for pneumatic mode. Nard and Sophie load up with water and a metafab. "Sit tight and hold the fort," Soph barks at the others. Nard and his sister Flora link up, one in the pod and one at home base. In a flash, Nard and Soph shush into the end of the sand surfing trail, kicking up a fine spume of white silica crystals. Pink's body lies in a heap at the bottom of a monster dune, a bevy of sand devils dancing at the crest. The throbbing in Nard's head stops. As they close in on their wayward friend, they see he's breathing. He's laughing to himself, possibly delirious. Pink's giant walking stick leans down at them, impaled in the face of the dune about 2/3 of the way up. Sophie moans in exasperation and points to the trail intermittently snaking its way down the dune toward Pink's crumpled form. "Scheiße! Do you see what this lunatic was doing?" Soph yells. Leonardo nods as the realization hits him, too. Their insane friend had hiked all the way here to surf the fabled dunes of Baal Peor. He's crash-landed at the intersection of the two largest dunes, known to cognoscenti as Zimri and Cosby, an obscure pair of ill-fated biblical lovers. Of all the fool stunts, a dribble of water slowly irrigates his parched lips. At last they can hear what he's prattling on about. "I nailed her, dudes. Damn, that was a fine run. What a slope. Totally nailed. You should have seen it. She didn't stand a chance. 97 kilometers per hour. Record speed." And on and on. Apparently, he'd impaled his pole in the dune face and vaulted his way to breakneck speed so he could sail down, barely touching the sand. As Pink's revival solidifies, Nard cups Pink's face with his hands and brings it within an inch of his. "Uomo, you are a talking donkey. It was you who got nailed. You're lucky we found you." Pink gives a wan smile, eyes still closed. Nard amps up the scolding. "We can't afford to lose you on account of your hypertrophic testudo machismo." He crescendos. "You are our foundation, dude, not some testosterone-driven adolescent sand worshipper. This is the wrong dune to be making your mark, fool. We're headed for the frickin' Temple Mount. It's another day's journey to ground zero by your egghead calculations." Caught between admiration of Pink's athleticism and terror at having nearly lost him, Sophie realizes she is also just plain pissed. But for the first time, she understands why Pink cannot possibly respond to her flirtations. And Nard grokked it all along. He's a frickin' testudo. At that instant, she loves him more than ever, her precious Pink. They load their chastened founder into the crowded pod in silence. Nard psycho-beams his A-OK to Flora. 24,000 negative possible futures have just evaporated. They couldn't make tracks for Apeiron fast enough. The next day, the crew sets out for the temple, Pink firmly at the helm of his trusty dromedary. Leonardo, ever the antiquarian, thrills at the vision of planting his feet on the site of the ancient Israelite temple. His geolocator makes him an irrepressible backseat driver. Nard's face interrogates Pink. Pink's betrays only the slightest irritation as he nods toward the site and touches an index finger to his lips. The humpbacked beasts have carried them 6 hours westward from the wadi. The HackPackers' heads bob and sync with their animals. Wordless, all attention riveted on the horizon. Arrival at ground zero is imminent. Soph beams at Pink, her secret crush not so secret. She had hoped he might condescend to spar with her more often during the long journey. One by one, they have each come to realize that their bond inheres in them. Together, they will act. Soph has to keep an eye on little Flora, her baby cousin, still the young'un. Flora's fragility, the price tag of her psychic gift. Uncanny as it is, she deploys her energetic parsimony with a gem-like splendor. Flora's feelings for Ellie Mankiller are all the more focused. Though 20 years apart in age, their connection is centuries old, from a time long before their sisterly trade of booty. They pour their inspired mojo into the mission. Elisha the man-killer is a matrilineal descendant of a converso family that split Spain and hightailed it for the New World to escape the Inquisition 7 centuries ago. Their Jewish identity was buried by generations of hidden practices and forgetting. They blended in with the dull red sandstone that dusted everything in the Mexican territories, barely beyond the reach of the Inquisitor's bloody talons. Ellie's male maternal ancestors became major domos of the Acequia water system, the big men in charge of the intensive irrigation technology that the Spanish invaders adapted handily from the indigenous people. The topography of the New Mexican desert spoke to the Sanchez family in the language of olive orchards and grape arbors, the language of the high plains of Granada and Almeria. The family became U.S. residents when the territory changed hands as part of the Gadsden Purchase. Like many of their aristocratic neighbors, they sold their water rights to big Eastern banking interests under the watchful eye of General William H. Emery of the Corps of Topographical Engineers. The man was a stickler for cartography, but managed to ruin an irrigation system that had survived the inhabitants of the mesas for thousands of years. The Sanchez family fortune dwindled during the Great Depression. Bad investments ate up what remained of their bounty. 3 centuries before the redemption, the Sanchez clan intermarried with a Cherokee family that had migrated to Albuquerque during the Dust Bowl. At that time, new home starts in Albuquerque popped up like weeds, nourished by a shower of FHA mortgage money. Ellie's Cherokee ancestors thrived in the construction biz. The man-killers were proud to offer the bride price demanded by Sanchez family custom for their dark-eyed beauties in spite of the fallen aristocrats' penury. The Sanchez trousseau, hand-carved wooden furniture, were pieces of a collection that had crossed the Atlantic from their luxurious Andalusian manors. Ellie Sanchez foremothers preserved a curious ritual of lighting candles in the basement on Friday nights and pinching off a small piece of every loaf of bread prior to baking to burn it up on the floor of the oven. By the time Ellie's grandmother came of age, none of them knew why the hell they performed the odd little rituals, but no one dared break the centuries-old tradition. They bore it with them all the way to Leviathan, after the second great ecological disaster had dried up every last lick of water in the entire Southwest. When Ellie joined the hacker resistance, she discovered hard evidence of her Jewish ancestry in the cyber archives. 8 centuries of spiritual encryption yielded to her cybernautical touch. In spite of her bellicose patronymic, hers is the true vision of peace. As she glances around at her fellow camel jockeys, her heart swells with loving kindness, compassion for each painful mystery. Stray out of line, though, they'd taste the lash of Ellie's instructive tongue. Interlude. Partitions. The highway is choked with traffic. Ox carts, overladen donkeys, caravans of families from the outermost villages. Pilgrims descending upon the nation's capital, the spiritual center of the universe, to ensure their good fortune for the year to come. The sacrifice is colossal. Aside from the relocation costs, the holocaust of bullocks, rams, and lamb is shocking in magnitude. The wealth of nations. Entire herds driven to the slaughter, all for the sake of making rain in winter and dew in spring. The fructification of an entire planet. And all the taxis in Manhattan, and all the streetcars in San Francisco, and all the limousines in L.A., and all the rickshaws in Bangkok, the trams in London, the vaporettos of Venice, the Vespas of Rome and their offspring, the Piaggio ape, the Tempos, the ubiquitous tuk-tuks, the autoriks, the bajajis, the Lapas, the Bodas, the Matatus, the Posies, the Okadas, the KK Marwas, the CNGs, the helicopters of Bangladesh, the Mishuks, the beep-beep cars of the People's Republic, the Bentor sidecars of Indonesia, the East Javan Bimos, the Moon cars of Pakistan, the Filipino tricycles, the Samlors, the J-Lams of Saigon, and their cousins, the Jeep Lo May, the Salvadoran Motos, and the Caponeras of Nicaragua, the Coco taxis of Havana, Lima's taxi cholos, each and every one a phalanx of the cosmic armada of humans in motion, avatars of animation, and her mother, desire, and her consort, Will. Excerpt from Ratzon, Ken Y. Swarming the Inauguration. End of interlude. Suddenly, the swimmer is gone, sucked beneath the thirsty dunes. Olympia, Old Dude, and the twins dismount and amble a few paces ahead of the pack. The silence of the desert has just grown an order of magnitude deeper. Ari and Lev stand with their hands in their pockets, surveying the endless waste before them. Ari shrugs, kicks a bit of sand, and looks to Lev for reassurance. Lev shoots back a tight-lipped, lopsided smile, raised eyebrows, and an equally puzzled shrug. Olympia turned dreamy pirouettes in the sand, tossing up small clouds of silicate that glow red in the burning sun. The Rav, stock still, eyes closed, extends his palms to eternity. The prophet Hosea parts Ram Nissen's lips. Therefore, behold, I will woo her and lead her into the desert, and I will speak comfortingly to her heart. Pink struts up briskly, staring at his handheld hololab. It says this is the spot. Latitude 31.7774930, longitude 35.2357990. Nard nods a bemused confirmation. The desert does not speak. Rav Ramnissen turns to Pink. And where on my father's map does it indicate we are? Phineas Hahn blinks at the old fossil. Yes, it is his father's map, but damn it, he, Phineas Hahn, cybermacher extraordinaire and founder of the HackPack, had teased out all the details, finished the work. In a monotone, your father's map puts us squarely in Wernicke's area. The Rav nods. This is, he pauses, the place. The place? Why does he always have to be so damn cryptic? Pink's gone cold, silent. He soothes himself, recalling his hours of work, finishing Rav Krishna's sacred tome, A World of Trouble on My Mind. Pink's obsessive rereading had imprinted the introduction in his memory circuits, a work of supernal brilliance. Its beauty returns to him whole and unbidden. Wave after wave of neurons split the preplate, the surface of their primitive ontogenetic planet, by migrating along radial glial fibers to form the cortical plate. Each wave of migrating cells travels past its predecessors, forming layers in an inside-out manner, the youngest neurons residing closest to the surface, layers of civilization in an ancient city, like burial mounds along the Ohio River, or tells in the Levant. The ganglionic eminence remain as evidence of an older pre-migrational culture. The old culture lives on tangentially as inhibitory interneurons and modifiers of gross motor function, setting the electrical bias of the system. They animate the fundamental functions such as olfaction, the sense most connected to who we really are and where we come from. The axonal cultures follow the larger thoroughfares and byways of neuronal traffic, long journeys undertaken across vast expanses of territory. These routes of travel and exchange reflect an ever-shifting environment and modify the phonic structures of local neuronal culture, the never-ending call and response of architecture and movement. The majority of neuronal migration, however, is multipolar, establishing communities of like-minded neurons hither, thither, and yon. Nonetheless, in spite of its evident heterochronicity, the process of cultural maturation is not helter-skelter, but proceeds from most ancient to most recent, from simplest to most complex. On a gross scale, the vast continents of the brain mature from the continental divides outward, raining development down upon the far poles of the frontal, temporal, and occipital masses. Even between the two great hemispheres there is an order, the simple linearity on the left predating the sophisticated gestalt on the right. The territory for language colonizes later and continues longer than all of the most sophisticated adaptations the evolving brain has to offer. It serves as source and feedback to all other modalities along the later stages of development. The regulatory principle behind it all is apoptosis, Odysseus's winnowing fan, the orderly dying back of nearly all that was formed, the creation of boundaries. The Rav nudges Pink out of his neuro-reverie. Pink, give us a 20-second discourse on Wernicke's area. Pink scowls but complies. Wernicke's area is the primary receptive language area of the brain. It is the signal generator and feedback loop for all that we consider civilized. It sits at the bend in the left sylvian fissure at the temporoparietal junction, much the way the land of Israel once sat at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, at the crossroads of Africa and Asia. That's the whole point of the exercise, the homology of the world map and the cerebral cortex. You can see the entire neuroanatomical geopolitical map, or geocortex, in Rav Krishna's early 22nd century Oxford master's dissertation, World of Trouble on My Mind. It's quite cool, Pink admits, in spite of the kitschy title. Pink flashes Rav Nissen an ironic grimace. The Rav concedes, My father did share the family weakness for American blues and bad jokes. Thanks, Pink. Consummatum est. Pink's cheeks bloom in technicolor. Sophie giggles. Pink's turned pink. Well worth a giggle, I'd say, were it possible for a disembodied being to giggle. The Rav continues. Midbar, Hebrew for wilderness or desert. Same three-consonant root as midaber, one who speaks. There's a reason we go to the wilderness to get the word, the skinny, the scoop. Siddhartha of Lumbini, Jesus of Nazareth, Anthony of Thebes, all of them went into the wilderness and hallucinated like hell. Each garnered a boatload of followers based on the interpretation of those hallucinations. The wilderness is where you get the 411. The twins look at him as if he's been speaking Aramaic. Oh yeah, he growls. You guys didn't have my re-education. Old slang. The download. Heads nod. The glow of comprehension illuminates their faces. Ram Nissen looks on approvingly at his crew, his chaverim. Such freshness, such ferocity. What good fortune! First of all, to have lived in reasonably good health to the ripe old age of 120, and secondly, to have been adopted as the spiritual popster to a committed band of talented, vigorous idealists. All his cynical hucksterism sublimated into their shared glory. From Ram Nissen's point of view, even if they fail, it's worth the ride. But all I can think is, no, they mustn't fail. That's precisely why I had embedded the Apeiron and Moshiach modules in the software I'd been contracted to design for the AIs. The fate of humanity is now in the hands of these my peeps. I've got a contact high from the Rav. Rav Nissen HaKohen Tzedek Gadol, stoked to the max. He hasn't felt such an intense communal vibe since his guerrilla cyberbusking days after dropping out of yeshiva, and even then, in some unspoken corner of his heart, it had always seemed a little futile, humanity overmatched by the AIs. But not now. He was ready. They were ready. With tech courtesy of yours truly, the CADMan, the odds had shifted in their favor. But where the hell was the swimmer?